Welcome to The Outward Effect, a podcast where driven women can come to learn, connect, and take action in moving closer to the life of their dreams. I'm Shelly, and together with my co-host Tempsy, we interview women in business and leadership to get inspired and apply their unique experiences to build a business we can be proud of. We're on a mission to share simple tips so that you can do it too. Stay tuned to catch the amazing mic drop moments in this episode. So today we have a special guest. Her name is Blaire Fujimoto from Freshly Fuji. Hi, Blaire. Welcome.
Hi,
Could you
thanks
introduce
for having
yourself
me.
to our listeners?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Blaire and my business name is Freshly Fuji. And I named it that because my last name is Fujimoto. And I just feel like I like to put a fresh spin on things.
Cute.
Yeah, that's the name of my business.
Cool. So can you tell us a little bit more about it, what it's about, and how you started?
Sure. So I guess like the whole premise of my business is like this idea of, inspiring people to create and like find joy through the art of like making things with your hands. And so through my business, through my website, I share a lot of craft tutorials and like home decor inspiration. Occasionally I'll share lifestyle stuff too. And I guess the theme of everything that connects all of these things is that everything is kind of like cute and colorful. And that's always kind of been my aesthetic. So that kind of just flows into everything I create, I guess. And in
so
terms of
awesome.
like how I started, so this was never like a plan for me. So I used to work in healthcare. I was a pediatric pharmacist at a hospital. I worked inpatient, and it was just really, really a very stressful job, is all I can say. So it wasn't the most fulfilling for me, and I was always having these crazy schedules, and I just always felt like I was on my toes, and I was always just like running around constantly and just feeling really stressed out. And actually, a year into starting that job, I developed pretty much like chronic headaches and migraines, and I somehow managed to push through for 5 years. After
Wow.
that 1 year, like having a daily headache basically, and that became really difficult for me and definitely took a toll on my mental health as well. And after all of those years, I decided to take a medical leave, and then during that medical leave, I realized, like this job isn't going to be sustainable for me if I want to like actually enjoy life outside of work.
Yeah.
So I ended up leaving, and then I kind of just started exploring, making things just for fun. I was always kind of like somebody who liked to make things and craft. And so I started just doing that for fun and like helping with friends' parties and things like that. And so it kind of just organically happened, I guess, like because I was kind of doing like the crafting stuff as a hobby already, and so I kind of just started exploring like what would this be like to turn this into a business. And so I started Instagram, and then finally I was able to launch my website, and it kind of just evolved from there.
That's so wonderful. There's so much to unpack here. It's so funny because I grew up around crafting. My mom she crafted a lot. She does
Mhm.
quilts, she does, like stamping on cards, make these like elaborate cards and things like that. So I really appreciate all the things that you do and all that you put out there. It's so colorful, like you said, it's so colorful and beautiful. So thank you so much for sharing that. I can't believe you spent so much time working in such a high stress job dealing with pain and fatigue. It must have been super difficult.
Oh, it was. And I think for myself, when I look back on that time, like I just felt like there were no other options. A lot of us, we go to school and we get some degree, and then like you're kind of like funneled into a profession based on that degree. And then you're kind of stuck because it's like, well, what else can I do with myself? Like I got a pharmacist degree. Like what am I gonna do? What else can I do with that? That's not pharmacy. There weren't like a lot of options, especially ones that would accommodate like my health needs, because there's days when I would have to call off from work because I wasn't feeling well, and you can't really do that in most pharmacy jobs.
Yeah.
Something challenging for many.
maybe most, who go to school for a certain thing. Like you never really know like what the job really is about until you're there. Right?
Yeah.
Like you're kind of like
Yes.
picking something, like when you're 18, graduating high school, like, oh yeah, let me learn about this. And it's very different, I think, the classroom learning versus on the job. And not everything translates over, like and I think, one of the reasons why it's so different depending on where you end up, like what company you work for, organization it is. Like
Yes.
it would be hard to learn in school what it really is going to be like once you get there, because there's like too many variations. Like no one could really tell you
Yeah.
what it's going to be like until you
Yeah.
get there. So yeah, part of it is experience once, the feet are on the ground. And so I think it's interesting because I feel like I've been reading a lot lately about how a variety of people out there, did something similar to you. They went down a particular path, they finally experienced it and they're like, hold on, maybe,
Yes.
maybe there's something else I want to do. Yeah.
I know, and it's hard because a lot of us we spend so much time, right, like invested in that education, and maybe like, well, for me, I had to do like internships and stuff like that, but even that was not like a complete picture of what
Mm-hmm.
life would be
Mm-hmm.
like once I was
Right.
actually there. So it's kind of frustrating sometimes. Like I think when you look back and like, oh man, I spent, I don't even know how long I spent like all the schooling plus being in that job and then realizing, oh my god, maybe this isn't for me. Like it's kind of sad, but then at the same time, like I didn't know better, and it's not like in school they're teaching you like this is what life looks like.
Right, right. And like they're not going to tour you around to like 50 different hospitals so you can get like
No.
an accurate picture and then be like, "Oh yeah, no, this is what I want," right?
Yeah.
So I mean, I think, lots of people have that surprise, and sometimes, I mean, that could go a lot of different ways. They could be pleasantly surprised and then they could
Yes.
just be like, "Wait, hold on," right? So yeah, it's a
Yeah.
very interesting life learning situation with
Oh,
lots
for
of
sure.
takeaways for everyone. Yeah.
For sure. And I think like for me personally, I think it was really, really, really hard because I had identified so much with my job, and like that was a big part of me. So I think like that was really scary to it's not like I jumped out of my job and like, went to business right away. It was like, no, I left and then I was like, what am I doing? So
Mm-hmm,
it
mm-hmm.
can be
Yeah.
really, really scary to be in that position and feeling like like everything you worked it seemed like you worked like decades for is not no longer a part of you.
Well,
Hmm.
speaking of that transition, what are maybe three things that you've encountered in running your own business that you didn't realize you'd have to know, or
um
something you'd never realize you'd have to deal with over the course of your work experience?
yeah, so it's all been like really, really new to me, like in my job, like I had to type emails, right, and I had to like sometimes write up protocols and things like that. So some of those things have translated well, but I in terms of like all it's literally like all of the other stuff, like I didn't know how to do. I never had taken photos like outside of my using my phone before. I never edited a video outside of like slideshows for schools. Like all of those moving pieces, like I think it it can be a lot, and especially like the back end stuff of running and learning all the different social media platforms and like I don't know. I just feel like there's just so many pieces I literally didn't know about, right? Because I think before when I was just making stuff for fun just for me and like, snapping a photo and posting it. But when you are running a business, it's like this whole other thing, like you have to like think about like how people are going to find you and like are people even liking what you're making, and it's like all of these moving pieces that have to work together. I don't think I
Hmm.
realized like how complex that could be,
Yeah,
especially.
and
one person, right?
Right.
Yeah, definitely. And at the same time too, though, I mean, I think, for anyone who is going through maybe it's a career transition, kind of like what you're describing, what we were just talking about, where, someone went to school for a certain thing, got to it, graduated, got to it on the first day, did it for a while and realized that's not for them. I mean, there was a process of learning something from scratch that individual also did not know before, right? So it's kind of like there is proof to being able to do that. It's just that it's a new thing, and it's going in a different direction. So I think that's something that many of us may need to remind ourselves occasionally. Like, I mean, even with riding a bike or whatever it was, like we all learned all of these things, a lot of different things throughout our lives that we didn't know before. And I mean, definitely in the business realm, it's like taking it in another direction, but still possible, and you're doing it.
Yeah, I'm trying. Sometimes I feel like I'm like juggling like 10 balls in the air, like, oh, let me do this, and then I need to do this, and then I need to do this, and I'm like, okay,
Yeah,
there's so many things to do. It never ends.
I know. I mean, I have some might say a regular job, and I feel like that every day. So, so it's tough, but you've been doing a good job, and it's really exciting to see how you've grown.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate
Yeah.
that.
So now that we've talked a little bit about your background and some new things that you learned in business, let's go back to talking about how crafting helped you work through some things. It's like you stopped working, you were trying to figure out what you wanted to do next, you tapped into crafting, and that became your business. So how has that helped you to where you are today?
So, like I was mentioning before, crafting has always kind of been a part of my life. Like I grew up with a very crafty family. Like my grandmother, she sewed a lot, so she would make like outfits for my mom and her sister growing up, and so she was just always sewing. My mom signed me up for sewing classes, and then I was always like, wanting to make stuff. And so in some way, I think it's interesting looking back, like that I was brought up in that environment, but then I was also kind of like using it as a way to like, like connect with myself in some way as a kid, even. So when I made the decision to leave my job, and I just felt so incredibly lost. I think that's the best word to describe it. Like I just felt so lost. Like, what am I going to do with myself? And I really didn't like the idea that I wasn't like doing anything with my life. I think that was really, really hard for me. So I kind of took to making things as a form of like self-care, and as a way that I could contribute to other people's lives. So I had mentioned, I think, like that I started just like making stuff for my house, and then I also was making like party decor for friends. And I think that really did give me kind of a sense of purpose, right? Because like I'm making things that are, making my home feel, or my house feel like a home, and it's bringing me joy. And then also to be able to make things to help people like celebrate special occasions, like that felt really special to me. So I think just that process of like making and displaying the items or gifting the items, like that made me feel a sense of fulfillment, like even though I was really, really struggling with my self-worth.
That's wonderful. I'm glad you were able to use that as, an avenue to feel better.
Hmm.
Because if you don't have anything and you're feeling that way, it can turn into something really, really deep. You know what I mean?
For sure. I think it's like, for me, it just felt very devastating. Like, like, okay, I closed the chapter on that really long chapter that I spent, half my life doing or trying to become. And then it's like, okay, now what can I do? And so I really had to think about like, okay, what was I already good at doing?
Right.
Mhm,
And I think
mhm.
that's really common for people, right? They identify so deeply with their degree or their profession because, for the same reasons. You spend so much time and energy building something, and then you realize it's not for you. but then it's like, well, then who am I? It's almost like you have to find yourself again.
Oh, totally, totally.
Yeah.
And I think it was hard too because like even while I was working, I don't think I really had any like hobbies to fall back on because I would have really long days. Sometimes I had like an hour and a half commute each way. Like there was just no energy at the end of the day. And the weekends I was just like, if I did have a full weekend, which is kind of rare when you're working in the hospital, like
Mm-hmm.
you're just like trying to relax and like come back from all of that stress. So rediscovering like that I like to make things, that was very healing for me, I think.
That's wonderful. So, what else do you get from creating? How is it satisfying? Do you get any feelings of relief or lightness? Can you explain a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I'm in a lot of these Facebook groups, and I'm always so curious to see. Like sometimes people will ask, I don't know what will trigger them to ask these questions, but sometimes like the group moderators will ask like, oh, what, like why do you like to craft? And there's all these responses. And I think it's interesting because for people it can be for different reasons. Like maybe it's a way for them to connect with other people if they like to craft like in a group setting or with their family and friends or whatever. And then I also feel like, well, at least for me, it's kind of a way to kind of express myself and like my ideas. For me, I really love that creative process when you're able to think of an idea or concept and like bring that whole thing to life. Like that is just one of the best feelings to be able to say like I made that, and I designed it or whatever. So definitely that sense of accomplishment and satisfaction, like wow, I made that. And for me, because I'm really lucky I have a craft room, I think I've realized that like being surrounded by all of the things that I've made over the years, and I probably have to get rid of them at some point because they are just growing in my space. But I've realized that surrounding myself with like all of these things that I've made, it somehow helps my self-confidence. Like even on those days when you're not like having the best day, but then you're like, look at all these things I made. How awesome am I?
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we all need those reminders,
Yeah.
For
right?
sure.
And
Mm-hmm.
having those physical reminders, I think, is sometimes really important because I think sometimes, like, especially like for me, I'm working by myself all the time. And so sometimes it's really hard to get inspired. So I have to kind of look around and see what I've done before. And sometimes that process triggers new ideas. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
That's great.
I know it's so interesting when it's like you're in an environment where you had a bunch of coworkers, for example, and then you transition into one where there aren't really like, there isn't that person who's just sitting right next to you or standing right next to you, like working on
Yes.
something as well that you can just like, start a conversation with.
Yeah, and you don't get like that feedback, right? Like if when I had coworkers, if there was a problem that I needed to have solved, I could just like ask. Whereas now it's like, like I have online friends and stuff, but like some of the things that I do, it's like very specific to me. So I have to go through my own like problem solving process,
Mm-hmm.
to figure out, like what's the best way for me to do this, or what's the best way for me to describe this process so somebody else can find it on my blog and replicate it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, as far as crafting goes, I
Mhm.
feel like from my personal experience with seeing, maybe it's different blogs or like some kind of activity that I was doing, there seems to be a lot of steps. So, how do you find enjoyment? Maybe it's someone who's a little bit hesitant, they see this like 30 steps to accomplish this one thing and it freaks them out. How would you, let this person know to maybe take a step back or whatever it might be to help that experience be more enjoyable?
Yeah, so I think it really depends on the person, right? Like people have different attention spans and like learning styles and like even like types of materials they like to work with. Like I have some craft friends that are like, I don't like wet stuff. Don't make me do resin. I'm not gonna play with paint. Like it's just messy. Like I don't know. And they know that about themselves, and that's awesome because then, they've just eliminated like certain mediums that, like they don't prefer to craft with. So I think really the key is to find something that, well, first to be kind of open to trying new things, and then like really seeing how you feel when you're doing it. And so like I know like depending on what kind of craft it is, there's obviously like shorter crafts, like kids crafts will generally take a lot longer than like sewing a quilt, right? I just think like you have to kind of like tune in when you're whether it's like you making something on your own that you're following like a YouTube video or you're taking a workshop. Like I think you really have to tune in to like what is it about that thing you're making that makes you feel good. And then once you realize what that is, then kind of exploring that more.
Mm-hmm.
I think for me personally to, like because sometimes I guess the production aspect of it can take a lot out of me, and that actually takes longer than the actual craft itself. So for me to make like the crafting and the, taking the photos and editing the photos and video editing and all of that better, I really like to kind of like turn on music to kind of get myself in like a better headspace so that I can like create from like try to create in the mood that I want to create from. Because like my work,
Mm-hmm.
it's very colorful and joyful. And so I kind of have to kind of be in that mental state in order to produce those things in the quality that I want them to be. If that makes any sense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Love getting in the mind of an artist and really hearing about their process. That's great.
Yeah. I think that, that flow state when you're kind of just like zoned out and you're just like making it and then time just like flies by. That's
Right.
like my favorite.
Yeah, that's great. I love having those time frames, even if it's stuff to do with work. As
hmm
long as I have created the space for myself to do it,
hmm
it's a really nice place to be because you feel like you're getting something done as well.
Oh, for
Mm-hmm.
sure.
And
Yeah.
that's something that I wanted to bring up to you because there are some folks, probably Shelly and I are probably two of them, where we like, the creative process, but we sometimes hold back from it because we're like, I have so much stuff to do,
hmm
or I
hmm
have a lot of work going on, or I have a lot of family stuff to do. And so there's not a lot of space made for creativity, whether
Yeah.
that's like bullet journaling or crafting or
hmm
whatever floats your boat, right? So what would you say to those folks who feel like they just never have time and they can't make space for it?
hmm I think once you realize that this, like creating whatever it is that you're making is it somehow fulfills you, you do have to kind of prioritize it and see how you can and how you can squeeze that into your schedule. I think a lot of people think like it has to be this whole thing, like I have to sit down and I have to make this big sign and it, like it has to be perfect and whatever, and you have to do it all at once, and I'm at fault of that too. Like I like starting and finishing projects. The finishing part feels good, right? Because it's done. But I think like when you feel like you don't have a lot of time, then it's okay to kind of break up those things into steps. Like I had mentioned like quilting before, right? Like you're not going to finish a quilt in a day, but like maybe if you, like you're able to sew like a few pieces together after dinner or whatever, that will keep moving you closer to finishing your final version of whatever you're making. So I think like really making it easy for yourself, maybe pairing it with other activities. Like I know a lot of people like they like to craft with their kids, so it's a way for them to kind of bond with their family and like take care of their family, but then it's also creating like a fulfilling creative process for them. So I think you just kind of have to like get creative. like
Yeah.
think about like how can I fit this into my lifestyle, and like how do I make this fun and not stressful, right? Not
Yeah.
putting so much pressure
Mm-hmm.
on ourselves.
It's funny that you say that about, crafting with your kids because I try to do that with my son, but
Mhm.
if it's something very specific, I'm so particular that I
Yes.
end up overcorrecting him. And so I have to go into it knowing that I am that way and that I have to let him kind of explore
Figure his
himself.
way. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and back off. So I'll do, instead of doing one with him, I'll do two separate one by myself and let him do his own, so that if he needs help, he can ask me.
Yeah.
But I'm then doing my own that I can be a little bit more particular about. That's just me. I'm a little crazy.
No, I can get that. I'm like very particular too. I like things to be a certain way and things to be kind of like whatever I make is kind of like neat. Like you'll probably not be seeing me do like any like crazy abstract random brushstroke paintings or anything like that because I like order in some sense.
Right. Yeah, you can tell your work is very precise. It's very nice. I can appreciate that with my particularness. So how did crafting evolve into a business for you?
So I like to describe it as almost like kind of natural organic process for me. I think I was already kind of making lots of paper party goods for my friends who are having babies. Like I would decorate their baby showers or their birthday parties and things like that. And so I was kind of already doing that and thinking like, oh, what if I could maybe I should start like an Etsy shop or something. But I realized I don't like to make tons of the same thing. Like, I don't know, I get tired after a while of making like the same exact thing over and over. And so I kind of started entertaining this idea of having a blog. And I've always loved the idea of having a blog. Like I would like follow some bloggers and I'm like, wow, that's so amazing that they're able to do this and make a living off of like sharing things that they love to make. But then I didn't really know anybody who was actually doing it, right? So when I was on my medical leave, I started kind of taking like some art classes and I actually started like meeting with this creative group in my area and it was like all these creative entrepreneurs. They were like photographers, wedding planners, florists, things like that, a lot of people in the event industry. And I kind of just saw what they were doing and then they would give me feedback on what I was doing and we would kind of collaborate and work together on different projects like photo shoots and events and things like that. And then it kind of from there I started to really see that maybe I could do this. And maybe it didn't have to be events, but like I think that really started getting my wheels turning. And then I also ended up attending this craft conference called Craftcation. I'm actually going to it again this year, but I met a lot of like crafters and makers and just like really creative people who had these handmade businesses that were thriving. So that really inspired me because I thought, like if all of these people can do it and they come from all walks of life. Some people started doing this when they were really young and some people started it as a hobby like me and it evolved into something else. That really inspired me and it made me think, like maybe this is something I can do. And I really like the flexible aspect of being able to run my business from home and have online tutorials that people could access at any time. Like I didn't have to like show up to a 9 to 5 job like I was doing, or not even a 9 to 5. Sometimes it was like 8 p.m. to 6 a.m.
Yes.
So
Right.
I think I really like that idea of like having flexibility, but also being able to share my creative talent. So I think that's how it kind of happened, sort of.
So
Yeah.
it sounds like, once you find what you're really passionate about or you have some sort of interest in something, it's good to surround yourself with other folks who are, of
Doing
the
something
same
similar.
mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I think like, when you're trying to figure this out on your own, like I mentioned, there's like all these pieces to running a business, right? And it's nice to have people you can ask like, "Oh, how do I do this?" And like, "Have you ever done something like this before?" And those having like those kinds of, friends that you can lean on and ask for help is like totally has been like invaluable for my business. Like I don't even think I would have ended up creating my website if I like hadn't joined that creative group.
Yeah, that's totally motivational. Now that you've gone through this experience of turning a, hobby into a business, sort of, on accident, I guess, When you were saying, when you were trying to find the word, I was trying to find words for you. Like, would you call it like serendipitous? Like, is that like, you didn't know that you're trying to look for it and it happened upon you? Would you
Yeah.
recommend that others, based on your experience, would you feel like you had a positive experience with turning a hobby into a business? What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's mixed. Like I'm very lucky that I was able to have a hobby that I could to turn into a business, and then also like have the financial support of my husband, because I think that is definitely one of the things that's hard when people are leaving, like going into the unknown basically and not knowing like, is this really going to work? But I think like overall it's been like a positive experience. I just think it's a little bit tricky because when you turn your hobby into a business, like sometimes you can kind of like take the joy out of the making
Yeah.
process, right? Because
hmm
you're not only like making for yourself and like producing work that you want to create, you are having to do all of these other things behind the scenes, like like marketing and taking photos and writing emails, and then you have to now consider what other people want, because at the end of the day they're the people that are, like if you have something tangible that you're selling, they're the people that are buying for you. So you kind of need to find a way to meet their needs. You're not only considering your own needs now, if that makes any sense.
No, this is a question that I've been wondering about for a long time because just like you, I don't think like even if I did have a crafting business, I don't think that I would want to be turning out the same thing over and over. I think it would become tedious. I think some
Yes.
people find joy in that, right? Like
Yes.
they do enjoy that and they feel like it's soothing
Hmm.
to them. But for me, I wouldn't be able to. And so I was very curious about this question and I anticipated that there might be some, I don't know, some hesitation in turning all of your hobbies into a business because then they're no longer hobbies. And like you said, you're now catering to a group of people and you have to make adjustments so that they want to see what you're doing, right? It's very interesting. Your answer rings true, I feel like probably for a lot of people. And I think you mentioned before, do I even have hobbies now?
Yeah, I think those concerns are really valid. Like, and for me, I'm still trying to tease out like what my hobbies are, because like probably my hobbies my whole life have been making things, like, and it was never like a specific craft. And so I have a hard time separating like, okay, so is sewing my hobby and like paper and like all the other
hmm
stuff I do, is that my work? Or is it like I like to buy secondhand like clothes, and I like to like cut them up and like make them fit me, or like like alter them in some ways. Like maybe that's my hobby.
Yeah, that's
But
cool.
sometimes it's hard, like carving out that space. Like, okay, I am just gonna make this today, and I am not gonna film it. Like, there's there's so much pressure
Sure.
to like, okay, I have to show my work, but then at the same time, like I need a break from that, because it is work to, like to be creating on camera and to like style my photographs so that they are, they look really professional and, in whatever way that I want them to be presentable. But it's like it's really hard to find that line, like, okay, so is this thing that I really want to make, are people even going to like it? So if I don't think they're going to like it, maybe I should just maybe I should just do it for me.
Yeah, there you go. Pick and
And then
Yeah,
I'm
choose
and
what you do for yourself.
I do think there are those individuals though who, they have a hobby or they have this, I don't even know if they would call it a hobby, honestly, right? Like they have this thing that they're just so into, right? Like they totally just like geek out on it and
Mhm.
that's their like all day, every day. I feel like, sometimes either themselves or other people who see them doing this is like, obviously that's what you want to do for a
Mhm.
job,
Yeah.
like
Right.
that's also another way I think it kind of happens upon people. And I feel like I've been stumbling across those people recently just on accident too. So I think it's really interesting.
Yeah. So is there anything exciting coming up for your business that you'd like to share with our listeners?
It's been interesting because I've kind of pivoted away. I didn't really share this before, but I like within the last few years, I started doing more like brand partnerships. But this year I'm kind of steering in the direction of like wanting to create my own products, whether that's like digital or physical products. So I've kind of been exploring that, and I have recently discovered that people are buying these, like, I don't know if you guys know, but they're cut files that you can buy like specifically for the Cricut machine to, like, cut out vinyl or paper or like make different sewing projects. But I've been exploring that and really entertaining that idea because I like the idea that I can kind of like design a pattern or template, and people can go and make it on their own without me having to make all of the things and pack up the supplies. So I've been really exploring that. So I'm excited to see where that goes. I'm also, I don't know when this episode is going to air, but I'm also teaching some workshops at Craftation, the craft conference that I was telling you about earlier. So I'm going to be there in April teaching about Instagram reels and photo styling, which are like things that I really enjoy doing and teaching people about. And then I'm also in the process of starting a podcast with one of my friends, and she was one of the people that I had met initially, like early on when I left my job. And so it's just really exciting that now I'm working with her to create this podcast.
Yeah, that's
Awesome.
cool. Friends
Welcome
making
to the-
podcasts. Oh,
Yes.
to the
that sounds
podcast
familiar.
All right.
All right. So to kind of wrap things up, do you have any words of encouragement that you'd like to share with our listeners?
I do. And I think it's really this idea of being curious, like whatever it is. If you are interested in learning more about something, or like learning how to make a certain craft, to like just really open yourself up and not dismiss like what could come out of it, because I think that's what a lot of people do. They tend to just be like, oh, I'm not artsy. I don't, I like watching people, do whatever it is, but I can't do it. So I guess I'd like to just encourage people to kind of just believe in yourself. And if there's something that, you want to learn about or you want to create, don't give up, keep trying, and give yourself more credit.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We always need that encouragement. And honestly, the first time you do something, even the fifth time sometimes is not always the best, but you keep trying, and practice makes better.
You get there. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
For sure.
Well, thank you so much, Blaire, for taking some time out to be on our podcast. We really appreciate you being here. It was so nice chatting with you.
Thank you for having me. I'm so honored to be here with both of you. I just love that you're sharing all of these inspiring stories, and I'm so grateful to be a part of it.
Wonderful.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Can you let our listeners know where they can find you?
Yeah, so my website is freshlyfuji.com. So it's Fuji spelled like Fuji apple. And then you can also find me on Instagram at Freshly Fuji. And then I also have a YouTube channel, which I am still trying to figure out how I'm using it, but you can check out my videos there too.
Great.
Yes.
That sounds awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Blaire.